During the last election, I made a video called What Biden Offers Without Mentioning Trump, but only will happen if we win the Senate. I listed a short list of things Biden offers on his website, but it would only happen if we got the Senate. Otherwise, he would have no power to do any of it, just like Obama had for the last 6 years. And well, we barely got the Senate with 2 traitors, and so the filibuster never went away, ensuring only things that got 60 votes or was crammed into the budget reconciliation loophole got passed. I was actually really impressed that they pulled off the budget reconciliation, as most of the time Democrats are way too timid to do that. We weren't entirely gridlocked, but we didn't do that well. So now I'm going to grade Biden on his promises. I'll give him 1 point if he fully did what he said he would do, even if I think he should have gone further. I'll give him half a point if he only partially succeeded. I'll add a point to the negative column if he failed or even appeared to go backward on his promise. And I'll add a point to the Senate category if he literally could do nothing without the Senate, so that's on the voters, not him. Here we go. $15 minimum wage. Republicans want to end minimum wage. I want it based on cost of living by county so people can live near their place of work in expensive cities, and it won't wreck rural regions, but I can deal with this. And Bernie believes Joe when he says this. That's 1 point for the Senate. He has no power over this. Expand access to Medicare using a public option. Not as good as Medicare for all, but the Republicans want to shrink it. Plus, this can easily get switched over to single payer if the electorate wants it. Senate. Allow Medicare to bargain for drug prices like Europe and Canada do. This would bring down the cost of healthcare like crazy, and Republicans hate it. This will be essential in Medicare for all anyway, so let's get that done at least right now. He got this somewhat passed in the Inflation Reduction Act, but nowhere near enough. I'll give him half a point and another to the Senate. Invest in public defenders. This would drastically reduce minorities and poor people going to prison in the first place, as many states actively starve public defenders, so the best they can recommend is to plead guilty because they don't have enough time. Republicans are the ones who starve them in the first place. Senate. Carbon neutral electricity by 2035. All Democrats, left, progressive, and moderate are on board with this plan. It even includes a lot of AOC's Green New Deal, creating new jobs with justice, helping out marginalized groups. Republicans want us out of the Paris Climate Agreement and to bring back coal. If Biden doesn't win, the Earth bakes. If we don't win the Senate, the Earth bakes. Game over. Both the Infrastructure Bill and the Inflation Reduction Act were huge wins for the planet that are potentially estimated to get us electricity carbon neutral by 2035 and full carbon neutral by 2050. That said, according to scientists, this is still not enough, and there is no certainty the model for counting carbon neutrality is 100% accurate. Add to this that future presidents will probably hamstring or sabotage this. I'm giving it half a point, and the Senate a point, of course. Protect women's right to choose. The GOP actively appoints anti-choice judges. Biden added many pro-choice judges to the court and Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court, but it still wasn't enough to prevent the overturning of Roe. Biden gets a point, and the Senate gets a point. Decriminalize marijuana. Biden isn't for legalizing it, but the GOP on the federal level appear to want to keep it criminalized. He's going to leave legalization up to the states. Biden has pardoned all federal serving or former prisoners for simple possession. That's huge, but sadly the states need to do the same thing. Half a point for Biden and 1 point for the Senate. Forgive around $10,000 in student loans. Not full forgiveness like Warren or Bernie were offering, but $10,000 is $10,000. Not something the GOP have any interest in doing. If anything, they want to raise your interest rates. This one gets a full point. He was vague enough that the exceptions made fully fit in his promise, though there are legal challenges that could disrupt this plan, so it's possible I should put a half a point. But to make up for that, he's also freezing interest rate payments so long as you pay the minimum, which is based on your discretionary income, excluding your basic needs like food and rent. So full point. I'll even put 1.5 as it goes beyond. Ending interest accrual is just as big as partial forgiveness. Pass laws preventing the president from interfering with investigations and messing with the vote. The GOP have actively looked the other way and refused to protect or pass this kind of legislation. Laws against interference have not been passed, but the Senate is close to passing a bill to prevent the not real legal loophole that the Six was trying to threaten Pence to use, so that's something. Point to the Senate. Paid family sick leave. Even without COVID, this was needed, and you probably at some time in your life got sick because either a care business or a food business had someone who forced themselves to come to work, or they would be financially wrecked and spread it to you. The GOP says it would be burden on businesses, even though most Western nations have it, and those businesses are doing just fine. Senate. Paid maternal leave. This would strengthen families and protect women and the children and the entire family when a woman has a child. The GOP said it would be burdensome on businesses, even though most Western nations have it, and so does California, and these businesses are also doing just fine. Overturn Citizens United. All Democrats especially want this because they're exhausted spending half their work hours on the phone sucking up to rich people just to keep their party from dying. The GOP is only being propped up by these mega-rich donors, so they will continue to keep these laws in place. Senate. Create a cabinet position to help workers organize and unionize. We need strong unions more than ever, as only 11% of workers are unionized. I also want him to overturn Taft-Hartley, but that's another mess, and people don't seem to understand what that even is. Republicans want to gut unions even more and push for right-to-work laws, ensuring unions have little say and no teeth at the bargaining table. So, I was surprised and didn't expect this, that the PRO Act that made it through the House actually overturns most of Taft-Hartley, but it is, of course, stuck in the Senate. Heavily regulate lobbyists. In the 1970s, only around 60 corporations had lobbyists in Washington because it didn't give much payout. Roger Stone and Paul Manafort came in and changed all that, and now there are over 6,000 corporate lobbyists in Washington. The GOP loves having them there. Senate. Provide funding to reform policing, switch prisons from for-profit to state-run, and switch from punitive revenge to preventative justice to increase crime reduction through education and community health, increase workplace training, and modernize schools. We've had baby steps on this one, slowly and reducing of the for-profit prisons, but we need the Senate to make any real change. 2 years of free community college with the ability to transfer those credits to a 4-year college. This is literally half of what Bernie and Warren were offering, and to be honest, it's where we should start, as this will help the disenfranchised more than free 4-year college ever would. We need at least an associate's degree to get the same jobs that required just a high school diploma 2 decades ago. The GOP thinks the free market should work, including allow scam-for-profit colleges to get away scot-free with their crimes, leaving students with completely worthless credits and so much student debt that they can't afford to go to a different or real college. Senate. Expand access to mental health care, a thing that is always touted by Republicans as being the problem with gun violence, but when you say, okay, let's fund it, then they go silent. We've gotten a few things through, but very few, and now we have a serious shortage of mental health providers, as trying to go through the process of taking Medicaid is insanely complex, so most don't take it, and the mental health of the providers is causing burnout, so they are quitting faster than they're being replaced. John Oliver did a piece on this, so you know the situation is bad. Finally, pass comprehensive immigration laws, so there is a real pathway to citizenship for all immigrants, documented or undocumented, and only deport criminals or persons who refuse to use this finally working system. Currently, this system is completely broken. There is no path to citizenship unless you're at least upper middle class. Even for legal immigrants and asylum seekers are abused and caged. This has been on the table and bipartisan in one house or the other since 2006, but the GOP blocks it every single time. This one is a mark against Biden. He did end forced separation of kids in cages and return kids to their families, now full of trauma and abandonment issues that will affect them for life. But he still has families in cages. However, most of this is on Congress, and there is limited funding for both immigration judges and housing money, so the immigration courts back up, ensuring the amount needed to house them is way less than provided. An ankle bracelet and letting them go so they show up for court would be a better solution than what we have now, but once again, Senate. End federal dollars to union busters and bust companies that negotiate with unions in bad faith. The exact opposite is true of what the GOP wants. Once again, this is in the PRO Act and requires a functioning Senate. Tax the rich $1.4 trillion to pay for all this. The GOP has constantly given the rich massive tax cuts and then jacked up the debt, which will force the middle class to pay down the debt in the long run. I think the rich can afford to pay even a little of their fair share, especially considering the rich have gotten so much richer during the COVID crisis. We saw a tiny bit of this in the Inflation Reduction Act, and thanks to doing that, we actually saw the deficit decline in the last 2 years, while Trump spiked it even before COVID, but nowhere nearly what we needed to get done. Repair the post office. We need to pay the post office debt and end the old Republican bill that put them into debt in the first place, and do what Warren and Bernie propose, making them a bank as well. I personally think they should be in charge of the internet's physical infrastructure as well, as post roads were called in the Constitution to deliver information, which would seriously drop the cost of internet as most Western nations pay 1/10 the amount we have for our data speed. This is not something Biden is offering, just my personal opinion. Biden is, I think, one nomination away from getting enough votes on the board to kick Louis DeJoy out, but any other fix to the post office requires a Senate. Invest $10 billion in public transit in poor communities. This will help reduce dependency on fossil fuels and help give poor communities much more free time that they are currently spending sitting on a bus that takes hours to get where a car would take 20 minutes max. The GOP has no interest in expanding and upgrading public transit in any way. The infrastructure bill last year and the Inflation Reduction Act this year have taken care of a large chunk of this, though of course much of it is up to state and city spending, so sadly most of it is going to car infrastructure instead of balanced with public transportation. Form a plan to reduce and end COVID. So far, the COVID response has been an utter disaster. Supply chains for medication, healthcare costs, PPE testing kits, and vaccines have been disorganized and in shambles that could have been easily organized by a competent government. Every positive action that has been done on the state level, and had the shutdowns been properly coordinated nationwide, we wouldn't keep having flare-ups in new states en masse. COVID would have hit the coastal regions in much smaller levels, and the rest of the nation probably would have barely had any deaths. Why do I know this? Because we have 4% of the world's population and 25% of the COVID deaths in the world. Other nations pulled it off, not us. The Dems have the HEROES Act ready to go and will support and protect people out of jobs by no fault of their own during the shutdown and the limping economy until we reach herd immunity. At the moment, once again, McConnell refuses to pass anything to protect us, and mass evictions are looking to sweep the nation soon, as people who haven't found brand new jobs in fields they aren't trained for, so they have to get paid much lower wages on top of the massive unemployment population suppressing wages, are going completely broke. We need an organized response instead of the slapdash one we have that's wrecking our economy in new ways daily. This is the big one, and he delivered. Trump left the White House with literally no plan for a vaccine rollout, and Biden organized and distributed it in a 3-month period after having to rehire a ton of staff that never got filled and not having any access to government information like the former presidents always give them until Trump. There were hiccups like telling people they could go maskless if vaccinated, which meant everybody went maskless again, and some other communication issues to the public, but all in all, he did what he said he was going to do until Delta and Omicron became an issue. We will see what the impact the bivalent vaccine does so that immunocompromised folks can finally feel safe going out again. COVID still kills 4 times as many people as the flu does yearly, so until they are on par, people with disabilities will continue to feel isolated as the pandemic never ended for them, even if it's just an annoying epidemic for the rest of us. As you can see, aside from the immigration issue, Biden has partially, if not mostly, done everything he promised with the House and Senate we gave him will permit. Currently, we have a 2-3 shot of winning the Senate and around a 40% chance of getting the 2 Senate seats we need to overturn the filibuster. However, we don't just need the Senate now. We are badly in need of the House. Since this is a midterm, we have a 2-3 shot of losing the House, some of which is caused by gerrymandering, but if we lose the House or Senate, all further progress will grind to a halt, government shutdowns will waste millions of taxpayer dollars, and pointless show investigations that go nowhere and turn up nothing will also waste us millions of dollars, all as a way to try and discredit Biden, just like they did under Obama. It's all a numbers game, and if you want anything done, the Dems have to win all of these, showing once again that thanks to the way the system is rigged, where 17% of Americans control 50% of the Senate, gerrymandering, and the Electoral College, Democrats have to win by a landslide to break even, but many who have not been paying attention will blame Democrats for not doing enough. I mean, they have all houses of government, when we never gave them the votes needed to do anything in the first place. So as always, thank you all for watching this as a video or listening to this as a podcast, which I'm sure was completely uncontroversial to anyone, especially to the YouTube monetization team. So if you found this useful, please donate to my Patreon. Just a reminder that I'm Anubis2814 on YouTube, and I have almost 700 videos on my channel that I've made over the past 11 years on religion, science, psychology, and politics. Please go check them out, and if your site has the option, like, rate, review, and comment. A special thanks goes out to Kendall Copperberg, Mylon Mia, Ogrel, Elias Garcia Guevara, and Joe Taylor for their $10 or more Wapawet level donations. I'm always humbled by the fact that they find my work worth funding and worth driving me forward. Thank you all. Please consider donating to my work if you can, and thank you all for listening.